and welcome to Football League World TV. It's time for another edition of The Fans Voice. We've been going around the EFL clubs on the eve of the 22-23 season, which starts this week, to collect supporters' thoughts on how they think their team will do in the upcoming campaign. This evening, it's a turn of Derby County, and I'm delighted to be joined by Jason Straw of the Rams Review podcast. Jason, considering what's happened at Pride Park in the last month, I suspect you're very excited for the new season to begin later this week.
Hi Ben, yeah, great to be on, mate. Absolutely, it's about time. It's been a long time coming for Derby fans, but yeah, it's okay. It's probably not the division that we wanted to start in this season, but at the end of the day, that's where we are. Same as any season, full of optimism and hoping Derby can bounce straight back.
Yeah, I'm sure the whole fan base echo your thoughts about the new season. Well, if you are joining us this evening, please feel free to send a comment in if you are on Facebook or YouTube, especially if you are a Rams fan, and we would appreciate it if you do share or retweet this. It can be watched back after we have gone off air. Now let's get into things. Now, we are just days away from the new EFL season, but we do have to quickly touch on the previous campaigns. It was a very newsworthy one for Derby. Unfortunately, mostly for all the wrong reasons. Administration did come in September, and following numerous issues throughout the season, no buyer was found by the administrators, Quantum, and in the end, the 21 points worth of deductions was proven costly, which saw the Rams relegated from the Championship, despite clearly not being one of the worst three teams in the division. But a lot has happened in the last month, as we said in the introduction. A buyer in the form of local businessman and lifelong fan David Clowes was found, and there's been lots of new signings since then. And from an outsider looking in, it looks like there's now a lot of optimism. Jason, could you just sum it up right now, how it does feel as a Derby fan? It does seem like the light at the end of the tunnel has been found, and the club can really push on and be a force.
That's certainly the aim, Ben. I mean, yeah, it's been certainly, obviously, the last season was really difficult to take as a Derby fan. Obviously, the administration and actually the ex-owner Mel Morris wanting to sell the club's been going on for a little bit longer than that. It's more like the last 2 years, and then obviously compiled with COVID, it's felt weird being a Derby fan over the last couple of years, and there's a real disconnect with the club, and it was obviously, for me as a creator of content for Derby, sometimes it was really difficult just to keep pushing out those pieces and videos and podcasts, and it felt like you was repeating yourself time after time. It just seemed never ending, and then eventually it's come far too late, we believe, but eventually at least there is still a club to support in the coming season. And new owner David Clowes, lifelong Derby fan, Derbyshire, very successful businessman, and somebody that anybody who's read press statements and things like that, he wasn't that interested in buying Derby County. He didn't want to buy Derby County. He's quite a private person. He doesn't want the limelight or anything like that. But he felt that he couldn't watch his beloved Derby County go under. And I think, that goes to show how close things must have been for Derby to actually be going probably out of business. Fast forward 3 weeks, we're on the eve of a new season. I know we're going to touch on it in a bit. 11 new signings. There's more coming, as we've been told. It's been a pretty solid pre-season so far. Yeah, we're a little bit behind other sides, I think, but from 3 months ago, we left Pride Park at the final game of the season, and we didn't know if we'd be coming back. And yeah, as I said in the introduction, it's not the division that I think we wanted to be in, but I think it's better to be in League One than out of business and starting a Phoenix club or whatever it may well have led to. Things got that close. We've just got to be happy that we were saved at the last, and hopefully, it's going to take some time. Fans have got to get on board with the project. They've got to understand what's actually gone on for the last 2 years at Derby. Derby fans are well known for being optimistic and demanding of their team, and there's just got to be a little bit of patience. Things probably aren't going to be as smooth as they'd want them to be for the next 12 months or so, but as long as get the foundations right, build on something, and so that Derby County don't have to go through these dark days again anytime soon.
Yeah, there's definitely a lot of optimism and excitement surrounding the new season, despite being in League One. Of course, there's one role that isn't quite so secure is the manager's job right now. Of course, Wayne Rooney departed his role last month. He resigned from his job as manager and he's gone back to the MLS with DC United. And since then, his assistant Liam Rossini took over as the interim boss. He's been in charge all summer. He's overseen the transfers in and out of the club. And it does look like he could be in charge for the foreseeable future, despite being that interim boss. Jason, is that something you're happy with, Rossini being in charge? And is he, the kind of person you'd like to have the role long term and go from an interim to the man in charge full time?
I think he's deserved this opportunity. He has been at Derby 3 or 4 years. I think he came in under Philip Cocu, I believe. And when Philip Cocu left Derby, most people were expecting Rossini to be sort of, the one to, okay, he'd not have got managerial experience, but he'd been a coach for a couple of years and everybody kind of thought he was going to get the job. But of course, Wayne ended up getting that, making Rossini his assistant. And it was a well worked partnership. I don't think it's any surprise that Rossini is the man who's on the grass Monday to Friday. He works on the shape. He's the one who leads training. He's the one who does all that. Obviously, Wayne was more of a senior, looking over things. It'll be interesting to see how he transitions. Now, he's the man making the decisions, and only him. I believe the Derby's goalkeeping coach from last season, Jason Piercy, will probably be his assistant for the time being. I think that's the way. It kind of was a 4-man coaching team last year, management team, should I say. So I would fully expect those to stay, and they be his number 2 as such. And yeah, it's a perfect opportunity for him. Turned down the Blackpool job in the summer, just before Wayne obviously left Derby. Presumed he had got some inkling that he may well be given the chance to become the Derby manager. That's why he turned Blackpool down. And it's his first foray into management. If he can transfer half the stuff, that he can do as a coach, and he's going to make mistakes, but as long as they're not too damning, then I think it's a good time for him. There is pressure at Derby. There's always pressure at Derby. It doesn't really matter what division that they're in. He's going to come under some pressure. But obviously, new ownership, new players, new team, new regime, new everything. It's probably the right time to have somebody fresh in there. Obviously, you've also got to have a little bit of continuity as well. And Liam brings that continuity. He's been around the club. He knows the way that the club works over the last 2 or 3 years. And to be honest with you, Ben, I don't really know of anybody else that there's nobody out there that excites me about coming in. He's a young, hungry manager. I say first proper managerial role. Yes, it's only interim at the moment. I would fully expect him to get it unless Derby start abysmally, and allow him to, implement himself. I say there's half the squad that were there last year knows his training regime and things like that. By the looks of it so far, from what we've seen in pre-season, the lads who have come in, looks like they've taken to training quite well. Looks like they're keen on impressing for Liam, and obviously these players came in whilst Liam had kind of got the main job. So clearly players that want to play for him as well, which is obviously always a good start. And he's a real nice guy. Somebody we've learned over the last couple of years, certainly since Wayne was in charge, where you saw a lot more of Rossini on interviews and things like that, and behind the scenes. And he knows his onions. He looks a really solid coach. And as I say, I just hope he can take that next step. Not all coaches can become managers, as we well know. We've seen that in the past. But if he can, if he can give it his all, it's all we can ask. And you never know. It might work out. It might not. But I think he's deserved of a chance.
Yeah, he's certainly someone who's clearly highly rated in footballing circles, hence why Blackpool did want him as their head coach going into the new season. Now, the most exciting thing about heading into a new season is seeing the new players of club signs, and with Derby's situation, it meant there was always going to be a few new fresh faces coming in, and it's been no exception this summer. There's been no fewer than 11 players signing for the first team, and some of the names from a neutral standpoint are incredibly eye-catching. The likes of Conor Hourihan was one that really set the pulses racing from neutral fans' point of view. Jason, whether it's what you've already seen in pre-season or just on paper from what a player brings, which of the new signings in the particular the club have made have got you really excited going into the new season?
Yeah, I think the man you've just started off with there, I mean, Derby's ability to pull off Conor Hourihane, I think, is an incredible signing when you think, 12 months ago he was on reported 30 grand a week at Villa in the Premier League, and now he's moved to Derby, obviously with a wage cap on nowhere near as much as that. So yeah, obviously listen to his interview when he came into the club. It sounds like he's interested and he wants a new challenge, and he's from in and around. Obviously, being Birmingham at Villa, he's not a million miles away. Staying local, got young family, and he just felt that was right. But that one does seem the coup. I don't know if it's because obviously he was playing in the Premier League and then dropping down 2 divisions is quite a drop for somebody who's only 30, 31 and could definitely still do a job in the Championship. For certain. So yeah, that's an impressive signing. There's a couple. I mean, you've got a couple on paper. James Collins in League One screams goals. Didn't have the greatest of times at Cardiff last season, so obviously you got to get the confidence for him. He wants to get off the mark quickly. He's not scored in pre-season so far, but there's been a few decent bits from him. So you've just got to hope that he hits the ground running sooner rather than later. And I think if you can get him firing in that first few games, then you've got a decent talent on your hand in there. James Chester at the back. I mean, experience. It's a position that Derby, you need experience at centre off, and James Chester is another one who is bags of experience, and it's the type of player that you would expect to excel in League One. Coming towards the end of the career, not exactly the quickest at the back, but we had Phil Jagielka last year at 39 who wasn't very quick, but because he could read the game so well, he didn't need his pace. He was a yard ahead of everybody. He knew the way to play, and I think James Chester is that type of player. Obviously, international as well. The caliber of player that's coming in has been pretty impressive. And then, as you could run down it, Mendes Lang's got Championship experience. Barkhausen, who you will know well, he screams experience. And then we've mixed that in with a couple of youngsters, Hayden Roberts from Brighton on loan. We've got a young lad who I can't pronounce his name from Manchester City. I've got to work on that one for the podcast. And then Corey Smith from Swansea, who I believe was on loan at MK Dons last season and did pretty well in League One. So we've seen a couple of those in pre-season look quite solid, and that adds to obviously the players that Derby were able to keep hold of, who actually, in theory, were some of their better performers last year that they've managed to keep hold of, and the right age as well. They're the younger members of the squad. So it's a real nice mix. It's a real nice blend. And after best part of 2 years of transfer embargoes and free transfers or unattached players and not much coming through the door at Derby, it's been more outgoings than anything. It's been pretty impressive. And like you said, it was always expected because of just the numbers at Derby. Certainly expecting more to come through the door. But as a starting point, if we take that squad that we've got at the minute going into the game on Saturday, it's as pretty strong as anybody, certainly in League One, I'd have thought on paper.
Yeah, there's certainly a lot to get excited about there with the new incomings, despite the fact, a lot of new faces being brought in. Do you think there's any particular areas of the team that, still you feel like could be improved? We've seen in the last week that Kamar Roof has been linked to the club from Rangers, which, would be certainly a statement of intent if that happened. That suggests, new forwards are still needed. Is there anywhere, else on the pitch where you think the club could potentially add 1 or 2 players to this summer?
I think there's still questions at both fullback, more so depth rather than anything. The right side in particularly, obviously Nathan Byrne was at Derby last season. He, by the looks of it, wants his contract terminated due to various reasons off the field. So it doesn't look like he's going to play any part in Derby's future. So we brought in the young lad from Man City. I'm sure it's something like a Koru or something. I'm sure that's how you pronounce it. But he's young, he's raw. We actually last friendly played Jason Knight there as a right back, which he can play that role, but he is more of a midfield player. So right back is probably somewhere where a little bit more experience. I'm not sure if James Chester can actually push over to the right as well, so it might be covered. But I think if you was looking somewhere right back, and then left back, obviously Hayden Roberts coming from Brighton, had a good loan spell last season in League One. We had Craig Forsyth, who is out of contract, but he is still training with the club, and it's fully expected that he will sign a deal. So that side would be pretty strong unless Forsyth doesn't re-sign. Then you've got to look at left back, and then I think the only other real, the Kemar Roof rumours. I mean, how Derby or anybody in League One would be able to pull that off, because I've seen Sheffield Wednesday's name in the mix as well. It'd be interesting to see. Rangers must be paying a fair amount of those wages if it was a loan. But yeah, I mean, anybody of that quality, you make room for a player like that in your side, I think. But I think if we was to look at it, the one other area is goalkeeper. I know we brought in Joe Wildsmith from Sheffield Wednesday. He's a number 2 goalkeeper. He was a number 2 goalkeeper at Sheffield Wednesday. He's never really had a full crack at the number 1 jersey. So, he comes to Derby with that opportunity. Not been massively impressed with him in pre-season. I don't think he's necessarily had a great deal to do, but something about him for me just doesn't feel like a number 1. We also brought in Scott Loach in the from Chesterfield, non-league, National League side. Obviously, he's more advanced and wealth of championship experience from back in the early 2000s, and I'd be surprised if he gets the number 1 jersey. But so I think that he's come in more as a help the young guns and maybe start his coaching and stuff like that at Derby. But that, I think, leaves the door open for maybe a number 1 signing. But you would have thought that a week to go before the end of the beginning of the season, that you'd probably have your number 1 in the building by now, unless they are looking at bringing a Premier League goalkeeper in on loan, something like that to bolster that position. But they'd be the key area. They'd be the couple of key areas for me, I think.
Yeah, I don't think Derby's incoming business is done by a long shot, and it's not just the new signings that have got fans excited as well. It's the renewed contracts. Obviously some players have left the club this summer, but 2 top youngsters in Aaron Cashin and Liam Thompson have renewed their terms. But I think the one everyone wanted to see remain at the club was Curtis Davis. He came back from a terrible Achilles injury in December 2020 and played every single minute of last season in the Championship. And now he's put pen to paper on a new deal with the club to potentially lead them back into the Championship. Jason, when you consider all the factors, is this potentially the biggest signing Derby have made this summer?
It's got to be up there, Ben. It's got to be up there. The man's experience is a leader. He's been at Derby 5 or 6 years now. Should have had the captain's armband last year instead of Tom Lawrence, in my opinion. But, that obviously wasn't my decision. I mean, Tom led by example. But, Curtis, everybody knew, the fans knew Curtis was the real captain of Derby County. It just felt right. And for him to have been given the armband again this season has been pretty impressive. Can he do another 46-game stint without missing a minute? I don't know. I would say that I bet he won't be far off come the end of the season. But of course, as in James Chester and Erin Cashin and Richard Stearman, who re-signed, there's options there now. Whereas last season there wasn't always options. Certainly after Jagielka left, Davis was the senior centre-back. So he had to really play a fair amount of those minutes. So I'm not sure if we'll see him week in, week out this season. But for somebody who speaks so highly of the club, calls the club his own, wants to be at Derby, I mean, as with a lot of these players, they could have gone elsewhere. I'm sure a Championship club would have took a punt on him. So for him to want to stay, he has all the way through committed that he wanted to re-sign. Took a little bit longer, I think, in the summer to get that one over the line. I think he wanted more of a 2-year deal, where Derby were kind of, just a 12-month thing for the time being. And I wouldn't be surprised to see him part of the coaching staff after this season if he feels it's time to hang up his boots. But it can't be underestimated, I don't think, how big of a retain that one is. It is pretty big. The experience, the leadership, I think it'll help. Obviously, we've got a lot of new players in there as well now. Some of them younger, some of them a bit more experienced. So, you need that all over the pitch. But Curtis Davis without the armband just doesn't look natural on a football pitch. You expect him to have the armband on, and lead by example, and that's certainly something he did in a Derby shirt last season. So fully expecting to do exactly the same again this year.
Yeah, it's certainly a big contract to get sorted, especially with how he performed last season. Moving on to quickly to potentially a few exits, obviously there's been a few players like Tom Lawrence, Ravel Morrison, Malcolm Abioli have all departed this summer already and to pastures new, but there's players also who are under contract at Derby who've stayed this summer that have been linked with moves away, the likes of, Max Byrne and Louis Sibley being linked with Coventry, and Jason Knight's been linked with a whole plethora of teams across England. Jason, could you see any of these being cashed in? And obviously, we know with some of the signings made this summer, there's some statements of intent, but no one really knows what the financial future of the club looks like long term. So, could a potential 7-figure sale be needed, or do you think the club will be fine this season without the need to cash in and keep these big players to try and get back up to the championship the first time of asking?
I think the business in the window so far, and as I say, I don't think it's anywhere near done, but I think the business that they've managed to do so far has been good enough that they don't necessarily need that 7-figure fee to come in, but every player's got the price, and not only that, you can't, if it's top end championship, lower end Premier League, those players can't be denied an opportunity. To go like Ebioe did and Luke Plange went in January to Crystal Palace. These players can't be denied that, and so I think that's the only way that somebody would go. I don't necessarily think it's a state like it might have been at the beginning of the window before the takeover happened, where somebody came in with an offer for a Jason Knight or a Max Bird of £1 million, and I think they'd have snapped your hand off because they needed the money at the time. Yes, David Clowes hasn't got millions and millions and millions, and I don't expect him to put in millions and millions and millions of pounds. But I also don't necessarily think it's now a necessity to sell, just due to the quality. So, the signings that they have managed to make. I think if that transfer side of things had gone a little bit differently, then maybe we'd have had to see one or two go just to help bulk out the squad a little bit more. But as I say, I think it's more going to be if a big hitter comes in for them and they want to leave, then there's no real point in keeping them around if they don't want to be there. I think that's fair enough, and I'm surprised that so far there's not really been. I know there's been rumours, but I've not heard of anything firm coming in for anybody. So I am surprised with that. Max Bird's been handed the vice captaincy this season, which would make me believe that he's quite happy to stay around. But again, it's like you say, somebody comes in with a few million, they can flutter a few grand a week on wages. I'm sure their heads would get turned. And like I said, to be honest, I wouldn't deny them the opportunity.
Yeah, it'd be interesting to see if they are still there come September. There's definitely some interest in the players, but it'd be big for Derby to return all three of those. One player who hasn't really been linked with anyone this summer, but has been touted for a move by his national team manager is Christian Bielik. He was a big money arrival from Arsenal in 2019, but he's had two terrible knee injuries, which has restricted him to just 48 league appearances for the club in the last 3 years. His manager at national team level is pretty outspoken. I think earlier in the summer he said he needs to be playing in a better and more competitive league than the League One if he wanted to be considered for the FIFA World Cup squad, which is coming up in November, of course. With that in mind, Jason, can you see someone coming in for him before the summer is out? He's quite clearly a talented player, but is there a risk that the club could, miss out on some value if they don't try to, shop him out now?
It's an interesting one with Christian because, the Polish manager, quite outspoken, said about playing at a quality. Obviously came back from his second knee injury last season. He'd only been back 3 weeks and they picked him for the national squad. So it can't obviously be that important to them if he'd been out 10 months and then made the squad. So I'm not sure Poland are in a position where they can probably pick and choose what players they can take and can't take, really. At the end of the day, if he's playing and he's playing week in, week out, then for me, he deserves a place in that squad anyway. But he's injured. So he picked up a knee injury on, I think it was Nations League for Poland. We've not seen him at Derby. He only just came back to training last week. He had an extended period of time off. All the noises coming out of the club are not really hinting towards him going. I think it's pretty obvious that if somebody comes in for him, he will probably go because his wages are, I would have thought, a lot higher than Derby really want to be paying out. But in the last, you've just mentioned it there, in the last 2.5, 3 years, he's made less than 50 appearances, which who's really going to be willing to spend a lot of money on that? I'm not so sure. A loan move, maybe, for the season, if the fees were right. Derby, I think, is contracted till the end of next season, I think. So at least it would give Derby the opportunity then, if they had a really good season and got themselves back into the Championship, that they could have him back. It's an intriguing one. It's an intriguing one with Christian, and it'd be interesting to see how it plays out. He would be a gamble, I think, for anybody. We know he's got quality and he can play in the Championship, and I do believe he is good enough to play in the Premier League. His injuries are hampering him really badly, and of course, he's only got to get another. He's already got a knock, as I say, a pretty sustainable knee injury that's kind of kept him out of pre-season so far. So when budgets are as tight as they are, certainly in the Championship, for most clubs, taking up a space for somebody who you can't guarantee is going to be fit week in, week out is a bit of a gamble, really, certainly for those top end sides. And I think that would be kind of the area that he'd be looking at. I don't necessarily think, no disrespect, but like a Bristol City or somebody like that, I don't really think that's the type of team that he'd really want to go to. So maybe he'd be better off. Maybe he'd be better off staying at Derby, because if he did, he'd be in that first team, I'm pretty certain. But then you can also look at some of the business that we've done in the summer. That kind of leans towards, if he goes, Derby are covered, because they have brought in a couple of players in that area. So it's up in the air at the moment. I probably expect that one to go down to the wire, Ben, and I wouldn't be surprised to see him leave on deadline day, to be honest.
Yeah, it will be interesting to see what happens. BL, it could be foreign interest from overseas in his signature. We've got a comment here from Chris, who is a Carlisle United fan. Great to have you with us tonight, Chris. It's intriguing to see how Liam Rossini does as manager. He certainly has good knowledge of the EFL. He's always been very well spoken when he's been a pundit and in interviews I've seen him. So I tend to agree with that. One other player we do need to talk about, you did mention him earlier, Jason, is Nathan Byrne. He was the Players' Player of the Season for Derby last year, and it looked as though year's extension was triggering his contract to remain a player for another year, but it's since come out he's been trying to follow in the footsteps of Lee Buchanan, who's of course gone to Werder Bremen in Germany. He used a loophole called the transfer of undertakings, which I'm guessing not a lot of people had heard about before that situation, to get out of his Derby contract when the ownership changed hands last month. And it does look like Byrne will now become a free agent, and he's been linked with a few Championship clubs the like of Stoke City and Millwall. Jason, I'm guessing this is a scenario that's bitterly disappointing, considering he's been a very solid player for Derby, and ultimately he's going to be a big miss, isn't he?
Oh yeah, absolutely. But I don't think it comes as any surprise to any Derby fan, because it's exactly how Derby got hold of him from Wigan 2 years ago. Wigan went down. He said he didn't want to play in League One. Basically, they tore up his contract, and that's how Derby signed him. So it doesn't surprise me he's going down the same route. It is a shame. I thought a little bit better of him than that. But at the end of the day, if he sets his stall that he wants to play at the highest level that he thinks he can possibly can, which is definitely the Championship. I'm not saying he's not. He was Fans Player of the Year, and if it hadn't have been for Curtis, he would have been Player of the Year. The year before that, I think he won it, or he came second or something like that. He has had two very, very, very solid, excellent, really, seasons for Derby. But as soon as we went down, I think we all kind of went, yeah, he's not going to want to stay. The way that he's going about it is maybe, leaves a sour taste in the mouth a little bit. But as far as I know, I don't expect to see Nathan Byrne in a Derby shirt again. I'd be surprised. There's been no pictures of him in training. He's not been involved in any of the pre-season games. So I think his Derby kind of career is over and done with.
Yeah, he's definitely someone you'd expect to be playing Championship football next season when this contract dispute is sorted. Now, before we end up wrapping up, let's move on from individual players and talk about the club in general going into the new season. Obviously, it's hard to judge when all League One clubs, haven't finished the transfer business or let alone kicked a ball this season. But Jason, judging on what you have seen in pre-season and from what the club have done over the summer in terms of transfer business, what are you expecting to happen this coming season? Is pushing immediately for automatic promotion too much to ask for, or do you think an immediate Championship return is realistic at the end of the day?
Do you know, it's really difficult because there's so many factors to it. It's a brand new team, near enough. If we were a team that had gone, if we'd kept exactly the same players we had last year and they all wanted to stay, I'd say Derby were one of the certain favourites to come straight back up, because technically it was a team that on form wasn't relegated. It was other things that relegated them. They've brought in vast experienced players who have played at the Championship level. I'm surprised some of those players aren't in the Championship and they're at Derby. A lot of them have also got experience of playing in League One in their career at some point, and I think that's probably the key thing. I think the style of football, to be trying to be as kind as I can, the style of football doesn't really in League One probably doesn't suit Derby. But the fact that they've brought in players that know how to play at that level or have played in that level before, that's going to be vital experience. But ultimately, it's at least 11. It will be more. It's how fast they can gel. If they can gel. So far in pre-season, they've looked pretty okay. They've not been blistering, but they've looked okay. But they are probably a couple of weeks behind everybody else fitness-wise. So it might take a few games into the season to really start to see where Derby are and get a bit of an opinion on what they're going to do. But I think from fans' perspective, I think of course we want to go straight back up. That's the ultimate aim. But I think realistically, what you've got to look at it with so much change. Obviously, you don't want to go straight, but you don't want to go down again. You want to avoid that dreaded double drop, which has happened to plenty of high popular teams over the last couple of years. So yeah, you want to avoid that. I think realistically, and you want something to build on. But League One is a bit of an unknown. We know there's some big Championship or ex-Championship sides down there, and they struggle to get out. But that's probably more so down to the style of play in the league more than anything else. So I think the optimist in me thinks that Derby can challenge for the top six. The more reserved side of me thinks anywhere mid-table and above, I think you'd have to put down as a pretty decent season, really. Anything other than that, I think with the players that we've brought in would be a bit of a disappointment, I have to say, with the quality that we have brought in, or the quality on paper, should I say. It doesn't mean that they're all going to gel and they're all going to click. Derby have been here before signing big names in the Championship, and they never, for big money, and they didn't work out. So yeah, I think mid-table would be a decent season, but there's nothing to say that they can't get into a groove and be challenging in that top six. I'd be surprised if they went up automatically. I think there's teams that are not necessarily better equipped, but they're a bit more experienced in the league. I think really it's going to be one of those sides that will gain automatics, but you never know. They might be in and around it, but small sniff of the playoffs. That'd be a decent season for me and something to build on.
Yeah, I think a lot of pundits and neutrals alike will tipping Derby to do well this season with the players they have already signed. Of course, we're in competitive action this weekend. The League One season does kick off against Oxford United at Pride Park, and then following that, there are league fixtures against Charlton, Shrewsbury, Fleetwood, and Barnsley as well for an opening set of 5 fixtures. Jason, what do you make of those? Are you expecting plenty of wins from them, or do you think the team probably still needs time to gel with the amount of?
I actually think they're a pretty decent first set of 5. I really do. It will be not so much that I expect Derby to win them all, but it will be quite the gauge as to where Derby are going to be. Oxford, 8th in the league last season, just fell away towards the end of the playoffs. You would expect them to be, pushing on. So they're going to be, on paper, they're probably one of the favourites to make the playoffs. So that's a real good test to start off with at home. First away game, Charlton. There's not going to be many more difficult journeys than down to the Valley in League One. So that's a pretty decent feel of a game for me. Obviously, Charlton been down there 3 or 4 years. If you go down there and get a result, you know, you're going to feel quite confident. And then in Shrewsbury, Fleetwood, League One, obviously League One, you know, mid-table sides really. They're the League One bread and butter that have been for the last couple of years. Again, they're a good yardstick to see where Derby are. And then, of course, Barnsley, a team that came down with Derby, and I'm sure rightly so, one of the favourites to go up. So again, another good yardstick to see where Derby are. I think 3 out of those 5 are away, so obviously that makes it a bit more difficult. Piled in there, I think we've got, you know, at least 1 round of the League Cup, probably 1, if not 2 fixtures of the Papa John's Trophy. So there's like 8 or 9 fixtures in August. It's going to be a busy period for what is still quite a small squad. So it'd be interesting to see how they can delegate the way through those games. I think it's a good test. I think it's the kind of start really that they'd have wanted. I wouldn't have necessarily wanted some of the big hitters all at once, just to, you know, it only takes 1 or 2 bad results and you can get on a bit of a bad run. But I think you've got a mixture of a bit of everything there. You've got teams you're expecting to do or to be right up there. You've got a couple, you know, in the middle. Then you've probably got one a little bit lower down, and it's going to be coming out of those 5 games. See where Derby are. If they can pick up 7 or 8 points, I think that's a pretty solid start. And again, something to build on moving into September.
Yeah, it's definitely going to be a hectic period with league and cup competitions coming. There's going to be a lot of squad rotation if the players are in place for that. And just before we finish, Jason's looking at the rest of League One in general. Is, you know, there any particular one club in general you think that are going to have a very good season based on what you've seen? Some, you know, it seems like the third tier gets, you know, more competitive every single year and better with more experienced players and teams coming to the level. Who do you think stands out right now before the season kicks off?
Yeah, I think you're right with that point, Ben. I think, you know, you're finding more and more players just starting to filter down to that league, aren't you, a little bit? And yeah, the quality's up there. I mean, looking at it from afar from last season, I thought Ipswich, they'd made some real interesting signings and just didn't quite click for them. So maybe this season they've added again. I would expect Ipswich to be up there. Obviously, you've got to look at the usual suspects that have been in the division for a few years now. Sheffield Wednesday, Portsmouth. Teams come down, obviously, Peterborough, Barnsley. You would expect to be in and around it. Wycombe, obviously, a team that were in the Championship only a couple of years ago, so you wouldn't be surprised. And then, you know, there's probably always a surprise package as well that comes in. Probably one of the teams that have been promoted from League Two. You know, they have a good go at it, and they can find themselves up there. But I think Sheffield Wednesday obviously stand out as just from the size of the club, really. They've been in and around it, missed out last year. Yeah, them, Ipswich, Portsmouth. It's almost the usual suspects, Ben, with League One, isn't it? It's normally one of those that kind of just miss out. And if a Rotherham or Wigan aren't in League One, then it's normally one of those ones that will be up there and challenging. So I'd fully expect those teams to be right up there.
Yeah, I think it's definitely going to be a very exciting season from start to finish, and the transfer business still not done yet. So we will see what happens between now and the end of August. Right, well, that wraps up our Fans Voice show on all things Derby County. Thank you, Jason, for joining me this evening. If you are a Derby fan, do check out the Rams Review podcast. I'm sure he's got lots of content lined up, you know, the season beginning this week and transfers still to happen. We've got more shows lined up tomorrow ahead of the new season. League One wise, we've got Bristol Rovers and Oxford United Fan Voice episodes to look forward to, as well as Championship previews with West Brom fan Matt from the WBA report and Millwall's Tom Letchford. So until then, we'll see you later.